Liebe Mitglieder der Jury des Private Medienpreises. Wir von CNNMoney Switzerland und speziell ich als Chefredaktor freuen uns, Ihnen unsere Interviewsendung The Executive Talk für die diesjährige Auszeichnung in der Kategorie elektronische Medien vorzuschlagen. Es gibt zahllose Journalistenpreise im deutschsprachigen Raum, wir wissen es, aber keiner wäre geeigneter für uns als der Private Medienpreis. Das zeigt sich schon im Namen. Ja, Nomen est Omen stimmt für einmal tatsächlich. Als privates Wirtschaftsmedienunternehmen würden wir uns natürlich freuen, wenn die Fernsehauszeichnung zum ersten Mal an ein nicht öffentlich-rechtliches bzw. gebührenfinanziertes Medium gehen würde. Ein kurzes Wort zu uns. CNNMoney Switzerland ist ein unabhängiges Schweizer Unternehmen, welches während dem WEF 2018 lanciert wurde. Wir produzieren täglich bis zu 3 Stunden Inhalt zu Wirtschaftsthemen und haben bis dato weit über 1000 Interviews mit Hunderten von Gästen geführt. Darunter mehrere Bundesratsmitglieder, ausländische Staatsoberhäupter, Firmenchefs, CEOs, VR-Präsidentinnen oder Vertreter von internationalen Organisationen. Mit unserem plattformübergreifenden Programm erreichen wir via Fernsehen, Website und sozialen Netzwerken sehr gezielt unser Publikum. Das sind Leader, Meinungsbildner, Entscheidungsträger aus der Wirtschaft im In- und Ausland. Ja, und einige davon, die kommen in der Interviewsendung The Executive Talk zu Wort. Einmal pro Woche befrage ich darin während 25 Minuten Schweizer Wirtschaftspersönlichkeiten in einer möglichst nahbaren, informativen und hoffentlich auch unterhaltsamen Art und Weise. Es geht uns in diesen Interviews auf Augenhöhe nicht primär um Zahlen oder Fakten, sondern mehr um die persönlichen Werte und Führungsprinzipien der Schweizer Business-Elite. Kurz, wir zeigen die Entscheidungsträger in den Boardrooms von Genf über Lugano und Basel bis Zürich nicht als Business-Roboter, sondern als Menschen. Aber schauen Sie selber, wir haben Ihnen eine kleine Auswahl zusammengeschnitten. Alle Interviews finden Sie auf www.cnnmoney.ch. When you say it had a lot to do with the image of the bankers as well, and the talks of salaries and that hunt for high yields, of course, would you say that after maybe 20 years, 15 years, also after the financial crisis, would you admit yourself that yes, there has been as you say yourself, that there has been exaggerated behavior? The bankers are in a way, maybe responsible for that image as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, it was always difficult to explain banking products. Even when I started in the 70s, we were somehow criticized for not being transparent, not having, it's not a consumer good. It's not a car or a chocolate you can explain.
Not something
everybody
you can
likes
touch,
it.
you can relate.
Or in compensation, a soccer star or a pop star who entertains people. We are not entertaining people, and in that sense, it's a bit more difficult to explain and to defend. That was always the case. But yes, I think we were too short-term driven, and that was one of the issues. That you generated volume, got a good compensation, and then a few years later, you have discovered that some of these deals were actually bad deals and were backfiring. And we changed that, of course, with clawbacks and with deferred payments and things like that. But I would fully agree that the culture in parts of banking, I always have to stress 90% of the bankers have never been driven by greed at all. But of course, there were some who exaggerated that, and that was a mistake. Yeah.
Were you one of those?
No, I don't think I was one of them, but did I play that role as well? Yes, because, it's always important to remember a little bit how the spirit was at the time. In '96, I fired a team who was actually a well-known global investment banking team because I didn't like the formula and I didn't like the money they made for themselves, but actually made a loss for the bank. That's the way it was structured. And I said, that's not what I'm going to support, and we changed that. And the funny thing was that the media didn't criticize those who left or didn't criticize or didn't applaud me for being disciplined and finally changing the culture. No, I was criticized for losing the best people. So in that sense...
it was almost the opposite.
It's the opposite. So people were... there was a different hype, and it's always fair a little bit to remind people that, yes, it is true, there were exaggerations, but it was also the spirit of the time was different, and you were criticized for not being on top of the league table.
Speaking of personal matters, you've been diagnosed with cancer in 2017, and you decided to openly communicate it and to be very outspoken about it, meaning you communicated openly towards the company, you wrote letters to the employees, you talked to the press. Why did you decide to be so open about it and to communicate it from the start as straight as possible?
Well, it wasn't from the very start, but it was very soon after the start. And I think the driving force behind it was really actually my wife. For her, it was just very important talking about it. And I think, well, there was no other option than talking about it very openly then for me as well. And I discussed it then with the people here, and I saw the merits. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy decision in the end. When talking about the possibility, of perhaps not being here anymore, somewhere down the road. And I'm very grateful for the support I got from my family on the one hand, but also here in business. I mean, I was away for 5 months. And I was able to come back and to onboard after intense chemotherapy and radiation therapy. And I had, a month here where I worked part-time. And then I went on a 3-week vacation. And then I came back. And I'm very grateful for that period, both being at home, but also, and that was very, very touching about just the amount of empathy about all the little messages I got during that time that helped me enormously. But getting back to your question, it wasn't easy to communicate at the beginning, but after it was out, I was so happy about being so open that for sure that's what I do again and what I can tell anybody else. Go for openness.
Of course, one of the cliche questions is always, what did you learn from it, or did it teach you anything? I know you've been asked that before,
yes.
and quite surprisingly, you said not really. Why is that?
Yeah, that is somewhat surprising because I heard all the stories that life changed a lot, and of course I've changed, but we all change a little bit every year with all the experiences we make. And right after coming back, I said I haven't changed, and then I got a lot of feedback. But Patrick, you're missing an opportunity here. You should really take this as an opportunity. And
people almost expected you to
yeah,
change,
and I tried, I tried, but in the end, no. I think I really haven't changed all that much. It's maybe because I didn't have any complications during chemotherapy. Everything just went straight through. I never had any emergency issues. It was springtime and it was early summer when I got back, and I went to the mountains quite a lot when I felt better, and everything went as planned, right? And that hugely helped, and all the support I got also helped, and so I'm still the way I used to be.
When you work for a company for such a long time, do you feel that you get more thick-skinned when it comes to critics, for example, as well? Does it help that you've been here for 10 years and that if you have to face critical questions, which I'm going to ask you afterwards as well, be aware, but does it help being here for such a long time?
Well, I guess having this interview with you today, I'm probably more relaxed than I would have been, say, 10 or 20 years ago. So there is something like experience which helps. But I should also say there is nothing wrong about criticism. Feedback is a treasure. It is so important to get different perspectives, because only if you get the different perspectives and if you are also open to accept different perspectives, then you can optimize and improve decision making. So I think it's actually a good thing, and it would be dangerous if you start to get isolated and if you are not open to criticism.
Let me challenge you with a little feedback then. It has been written, and you've heard that question many times before as well. You're the best earning CEO in Europe. You got 15 million last year. Are you worth that much money?
I mean, I would do the job for less money, and what I think, nevertheless, is and that's what I have to consider if I think about the remuneration of my direct reports. I think what is important is that you are competitive, and with the remuneration, that we pay our good people well. I think what is also very important is that the remuneration is closely linked to the success. And if this is the case, then typically there is also acceptance of the remuneration. And as far as Roche is concerned, I mean, if you look at our approval rates at the General Assembly, where the remuneration is approved, this is typically beyond 99%. So I do feel it's important to pay competitively, but it's also very important to link it to the success.
Are you a pragmatic leader as well? I mean, you're a boss of 2,500 people in your department, so you have a big responsibility there as well. If I take that alpha model still, are you an alpha leader? Are you quite decisive? Would you call yourself a strict boss?
In my ministry, you have to decide a lot. You have a big portfolio. So this means I'm also depending on my collaborators, that they prepare every question in a very professional way, and then I have to decide. But so I depend on the team, but I decide. You must decide yourself, and sometimes we have discussions, but I think when they give me good information, I can decide, and I hope always that my team is supporting me, can also think what are the arguments which led to yes or no, or let's go, let's wait. And this is for me, at the end of the day, a good leader, because if you are lonely, moving in another direction, and your team does not understand or has not the feeling they are part of this decision, it's not a good decision.
Is that something that you will miss once you're not in the Federal Council anymore? Or to put it differently, is that something that you would like to continue? I mean, having power and having a team that you can share responsibility with, or do you think that you will be, arriving at a point where you say, no, now I've had it. Now I want to do something completely different?
I think what is interesting in my job, it's not the power. It's more, we have important objectives, and I can contribute, bringing Switzerland to the future. I think this I will miss probably. You have not as much influence as in my function, but what I will love in my future life is probably you are free again. I'm now really a public person. You have a lot of barriers and a lot of, not a lot of time for my husband, my mother, my family, my friends. I think I will love to have more time for.
And you have to constantly be aware of what you're saying, and not saying too much, and not saying the wrong thing at the wrong time as well. Does that bother you as well sometimes? When you talk about barriers and restrictions, that's something every politician has to learn to live with, right?
Yes, that's correct. And we have also secrets. We have sometimes, because of our system of collegiality, we have a common speaking note, and this
almost like a code.
Yes, sometimes you must adhere to this, and this is not always easy. And sometimes you are a majority, then it's easy. Then you are in the minority, then it's not easy at all. But this you have to learn, and I think I will love to be again a simple citizen with a special experience, but not as much in the public as today.
To have that courage and say, okay, something is not quite right, let's change things around. Was that a hard thing to do, or was it even simpler because things weren't doing so well?
You said it. I mean, I think, in the beginning it was really easy because I walked in, the business was in trouble, and people were looking at me for the answer, like the oracle, and of course I wasn't. And so it was easy to make the early changes because I could just say, we're going to go over there, and people went over there because they knew what we were doing wasn't working. Over time, as we proceed to being more and more successful, people are just as cooperative and eager to go, but it's not always easy to make changes because things are working. And so sometimes you need to change the things that are working drastically. I'll add one story. After my 5th year here, and my team now knows the story, in January of one night I woke up, before I went to bed, I thought, I don't know if I'm the right person to run this company for the next 5 years. So we've had a great run, but what would the person look like? And I went through and really thought.
You had self-doubts in the middle of success.
I did. Well, because of the success. And so I really thought, should we get somebody else to do this? And I went through and sketched out who it would be. And I thought, well, the next CEO would probably look a lot like me. Would have some differences, but would also be risky to hire one. So I thought, what do I do? Do I stay? Do I go? So I decided to fire myself. So I fired myself that night, and I went to bed. I thought, I'll decide what to do in the morning. I woke up the next morning, and I thought, okay.
I'm rehiring myself.
I did, and I decided to rehire myself on one condition: no sacred cows. Yeah. Nothing that I've done, no person, no strategy, no project, no seed, is sacred. And so I immediately started making some changes, and I feel like a newcomer again. And I felt like that ever since. I mean, now I'm a year into that, and I feel just as enthusiastic as ever.
This is incredible. For me, it shows that you think a lot about your role, also that your position in the company. Is it true that you kind of define your own goals as well on a yearly basis? That you even have an Excel sheet where you kind of where you
you do know a lot.
You grade yourself from a year-to-year basis. Is that true? Or
now I'm horrified that you know all of my nasty details. Yeah, starting when I was about 20, in my 20s, I would take 8 areas of my life, my work, my health, my kids, my marriage, my finances, everything, and I would set goals, set long-term goals, then short, intermediate goals, and then start measuring things, have actions, and this is going to sound terrifying. Usually at this point, people's eyes start to glaze over, and they think, what kind of weirdo is this? And then at the end of the year, I would score all that. Never got better than a 66%, by the way. And then I would write my goals for the next year. So I did that every year for years and years and years. And I found out later that my CFO did the same thing after he came to work for me, or for us. But yeah, I did do that. Now I'm a little less detailed about that aspect of it. But I still do something like that every year.
And how do you fare on a yearly basis? Are you getting better?
No, actually, my goals get higher and my performance stays about the same.
That goes into another mistake that you admitted, that you said, I shouldn't have run again for the last 4-year term. Is that because you thought it is nice and I like my life and I like my privileges? So is that maybe a mistake that a lot of people with power do, that they don't know when to stop,
when to finish,
or when to quit?
Yeah, but the people, they love me, my family, my love. They said, stop in 2014 now. It's the best you can do. But then the Crown Prince, Platini, he said then in December of the same year, I will not be a president.
You go ahead again.
Yeah, I will not be. And then the others, my friends, but then they betrayed me later, doesn't matter. But they said, listen, we are not ready in another continent to have a president. So go on for the next term of office. And then I came there in, and this was wrong. This was a mistake. This was wrong.
And it cost you a lot of pain, I guess, and we heard that before. And it cost you a lot of years, also fighting against these allegations. When you look at yourself now, you're 82, I may say so. Are you a happy man?
I am a happy man. I'm a happy man now because I have recovered of all these collateral damages that I suffered. The only thing I don't recover, and this is such a pity, my granddaughter, she was at a school, in a college in Sion, and then when all this happened, then she was mobbed because her grandfather is a bad guy.
How do you deal with all these setbacks? You said it before. You're a man with a lot of faith. You believe in God. You take your strength from there. Is that all, or do you take the will to go on fighting as well? Do you take it from somewhere else as well?
Oh no, I am a fighter, and when I put my mandate at disposal, I did it by purpose because the American authorities, they have attacked FIFA by saying it is a mafia organization and they might be punished. And the way I put it at disposal, then they changed. It's now a victim. But in the same time, the FIFA, they should have given me the right to reorganize a little bit, and then they suspended me. My own FIFA suspended me, and this is something which I should have at that time fought against it, saying no, I don't accept that because I'm elected by the Congress. It's only the Congress that can come in, and there is the moment where I have lost my energy to fight, but now I have recovered my energy. And okay, with my faithful life, but I have this energy, and I still have this energy, and I still have to do. I don't want to work. I want to create and to do something. And I have still a lot of correspondence. I'm giving speeches in organizations, and so. And I enjoy my life. I enjoy my life.
Back in the day, when in the 90s, those areas were even more male-dominated than they are now. Did you ever get to limits being a woman in those fields, in those companies, in those areas?
Well, at the start of the career, and maybe I was very naive, I didn't even think about it. So for me, coming from university where you don't really feel that, I entered a job where I didn't feel any constraints. And so I did not at all limit myself. When I started my first job, I was lucky as well. And this is something I understand now. At the time, I didn't even realize it, to find colleagues that were very already advanced in their careers and did not have an issue at all. When I started then my first biggest management role, I realized finally that, things might be different because I'm a woman.
It took you a long time to realize.
It took about 10 years to come to a point where I started feeling that, I was maybe a little bit different.
But feeling in a negative way?
Yes, in a negative way, because I was not prepared, actually. I never had prepared myself. I thought, when you do a good job, that's what, you paid for and you like and you're engaged, you're passionate. Nobody's going to stop you. And it took me 10 years to get there where I started really reflect. And then I was lucky to be, I would say, old enough to reflect a little bit better on what was happening, looking at different behaviors as well, and getting on with it. But it took me a little bit too long, I think.
What about now? You're a top executive in this country. Do you ever feel the famous glass ceiling, or is that not something you think about on a daily basis?
I do think about it, less about myself, because I think I passed a little bit this point. But I think a lot about it, about younger female talents entering a job, how it might feel to them. And of course, when I started my job, I had nobody to talk to. So today I take a lot of time to talk to young female colleagues or young female managers. And I find that they start from the start to asking themselves these questions, even if they are in an environment that is actually not limiting them. So I think now it's impregnated in the generation that they at least are fully aware that this might happen, sometimes even too much aware of it. They anticipate that, even if it's not there yet, maybe. So I think it's important to talk about it, to create clarity, to accompany people in their careers, to show sometimes that what they think doesn't even exist, or if it exists, what can be done as well to change these kind of behaviors you might find. So it's a big topic.
Complete change of subject. You were talking about running. You were running when you were younger. You were Swiss champion over 110-meter hurdles. Twice, I think. Even.
That's a long time ago.
You've been at the European Championship as well. And you once said you've seen a lot of people fall at the 10th hurdle. Would that be some kind of leadership principle that you have, or kind of leadership, even advice you say, go your way, but always, always be careful to kind of finish the race?
I think that's not a bad symbol. Yes, I think it's what I always say is it's not important to be the first at the first hurdle, but it's important to be the first after the last hurdle. And in a way that explains very well what you are doing when you are in such a position, because there are always issues that come up. What I never say, not even to my executives, is that when you do 110-meter hurdles, you know that the race ends after 110 meters. This is a continuous race and it never ends. So there will always be the next hurdle.
A striking thing is you're not the only former sportsman who is in banking. For example, Philipp Hildebrand, who was a competitive swimmer. Do you think that plays a part? Do you think sports helps you in the position you have now?
I think it's very hard to generalize that. I think statistically, if you can name two people out of an industry that employs 100,000, that's not yet statistically relevant, probably. I think that I can only say what the sport or be a competitive sport has taught me is that you learn to win, but you also learn that sometimes you lose, and you learn to focus on a topic. And for me, that was when I was a young boy or man, was very relevant. I would say that's what I ultimately gained. So I don't give up lightly.
And you probably don't like to lose too much. I take from that you're ambitious. How long can you stay on ambitious? And you talked about it. You're from these 35 years of your work you've been doing, you have had some great jobs and some very probably demanding jobs. Do you see yourself doing that for the next 20, 30 years?
It depends how long I live. I think as long as I remain curious, I think I would always find something which would interest me, I guess. I would hope.
Final question, and please correct me if it's not true. I read somewhere that with 5 years, you did advertising for fish fingers. I don't know whether that's true. So you've been
I don't know how you found out, but I must say it's actually true.
It is true.
And it's even worse, not only for fish fingers, but also for mayonnaise and mustard.
You talked a little bit about about your core values and how you see yourself. Being transparent is one thing. If I listen around and I talk to people, they all said Alexis Nazar he's got his principles. However, he doesn't like structures too much, so he doesn't. He's quite informal. Apparently, you don't like to be mistered, so you don't need all these formalities. How do you keep that balance? That being straight as a leader, really give goals and give orders. On the other hand, being quite informal, isn't that quite a big split?
It's one of my paradoxes, because I'm a very disciplined. I'm an extremely disciplined person, right? I don't do almost nothing randomly. I mean, everything falls within an activity system, which is very, very deliberate. And
you have for example, you have your specific meal times. You have your specific
absolutely
daily routines. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Even I have my weekend windows, where if you work, I even have a hierarchy of priorities. I'm quite an organized person, which helps me get more done, if you like. So I'm very disciplined as a person, but I'm not formal. right? I mean, you know, when I run my executive committee, we have a very clear agenda, which is very well minuted and which is followed through every time systematically by people who are dedicated to do this work. But for me, that has nothing to do with being formal or informal. Personally, I'm not formal. I like to have a laugh. I like to talk to people on a first name basis. Leadership is not about, you know, hiding behind big titles and big walls. That's not what leadership about, and that's not at all what my belief is. So that is why I spend a lot of time internally saying, just stop calling me Mr. I mean, I am Alexis, it's good enough. You know what I need you to do, and that's enough.
But isn't
and
it
we can have a beer together, and we can have a joke together.
But
that's
having
fine.
a beer with someone, you might work with someone who knows the boundaries and knows that, you know, I still have to kind of deliver.
Yeah.
But, you know, isn't it difficult sometimes to kind of change the switch and say, look, now I'm your boss. I'm just Alexis.
You know, it comes to me quite naturally because it's my personality. I am like that. It's not a huge effort. I've always been like that. So, you know, as you say, I'm born in the 60s, so I have...
You are very successful. Do you know failure?
I know failure. You know, I practiced sports for about 10 years. I was in competitive sports. I was an ice skater. I started when I was 6, 7 years old. My mother was a very successful ice skater, participated in the Olympics and so on. And it was clear for me that I would participate in the 1988 Olympics in Sarajevo as an ice skater.
Which wasn't the case, I think we can say that.
And about 1986, I realized this was never going to happen. And I was second to last on the Swiss Championships. And I thought, this is not the place where I ever want to be again. And I stepped down, ended this, and from then on, I decided I want to be successful.
So can you see this was a pivotal moment, maybe also for your career, for your life as a businesswoman, that you keep telling yourself, I don't want to live that again.
Well, I just don't want to be last or second last or the last third. I want to be successful. I think it's important, and I'm grateful for my career and the way it worked. That things worked out well, not everything, but most of it.
That culture of failing that, for example, the Americans are really cultivating, is that something that we're lacking? I mean, if you look at the Swiss business world, are we too risk averse as well?
Yeah, I think we're totally risk averse, as I said before. You know, people that fail once, it's hard to give them trust again. And I think they're not given trust by society. And I think probably also by the business elite. It's the media as well. You know, if people fail, you read about them and you think, oh my God, that guy, he failed there. He will never get a decent job.
Are you the same? I mean, would you think that as well if you read?
I think it influences me. Yeah, of course it influences me. You know, I look at what somebody has done, and if somebody had had success after success, of course I think this person will do well, whatever they do. And if somebody has failed, I don't think about what he could have learned from failing and what he could do better.
Speaking of that, of these reactions, I mean, some people said, who is this person? Why? What's behind it? Why is he interested in Andermatt? I mean, there was some suspicion, let's call it that way. Did that hurt you on a personal level as well? That I mean, you've been very successful before.
Not at all, because actually I had this experience everywhere I went. I mean, even in Egypt, when I started this project, instead of going to Sharm el-Sheikh or Hurghada, I decided to go in the middle of nowhere. And everybody thought I was crazy. My father even was telling everybody, oh, it's just an excuse so that he can go fishing 2 days a week. Because at that time we had only 1 day off. We were working 6 days. And this was not very seriously taken as a project in the beginning. And so I knew that this reaction is normal. I was not surprised. I would have been surprised if people had said, yes, great idea, bravo, and so on, because it's just not done.
That's something that goes through your whole career. You start ventures and projects, which in the beginning people might say, even your father said, this can never be done. Is that something typical for you as a businessman, as a human being as well, that you try to challenge yourself?
As a businessman, yes. As a human being, no. As a human being, I'm quite down to earth in my aspirations and actually don't do anything extravagant in my personal life. But in business, it's always been the driving force to do something that others don't do or haven't done, so that I don't need to compete. the fear of competing was always the driver in the search for something new, something that nobody has done or nobody is actually doing, so that I'm all alone and I have a quasi monopoly that allows me to work at my pace and allows me also something that I'm very proud of, not to make unnecessary compromises.
That approach to life and to management as well. I often think you come from a family with 11 children, so you had 10 sisters and brothers. It is quite a striking fact, so I had to bring it up, of course. Did that upbringing, being in a big family and probably having to fight for your position and for your place in life and in the family, did that teach you a lot for all that came afterwards for the business?
I'm pretty sure. Also, the way we were raised with not a lot of means, but with an open mind, and also with a no-limit philosophy. My mother could say, if you want to be a great dancer, you can be a great dancer. I think I would never be. But
who knows?
But I mean, the fact that the way you are raised and the fact that when you are a lot of children, you must each one have a role, and you must contribute to the group. I was among the oldest ones, so when I was 13, I was going to the bank for my mother because she couldn't go. So we had to do things that normally we don't do at that age.
And you had to deal with people and situations that you weren't used to. So in that way, do you see the MPS maybe as your extended family, a little bit like it was 40 years ago?
MPS is not an extended family. It's part of our life. Each of the person who works here, it's a big part of your life, but each of those people has a family. And I think it's important to not to mix too much, because you must have some air outside of your work. These are two different tempo, two different places.
You were talking about your mother, and that's another thing I read, and please correct me if it's not wrong. I think after having 11 children and raising them pretty much alone, I think your mother did another study. She went into criminology. Yeah. She opened up a whole new field. We were talking about role models before. How much does...
About what?
Role models,
yeah,
and how they influence us. How much did your mother influence you in your professional career, in that attitude that everything is possible, and as you said, that she always said, if you put your mind to it, you can do it.
Yeah, I think she... At least I'm not so stubborn. She's really stubborn. I'm not as much as her. I'm stubborn, but not as she is. But it's true that the fact that we were raised in the manner that there's no limit, but there's a lot of ethic.
Have you always loved what your family does? Because we're in a typical traditional family business, and some might say, that's not always what a young child wants to do. But is it? Have you always been tempted by that business and by colors?
For a young child to be among colors, among artistic products, it's a dream from the beginning. I mean, don't you remember the first box that you received as a child? It's a treasure, and of course, when I was I can't remember, but probably 4 or 5 years old, and I received that first box. I mean, you can't do anything else than fall in love with it, because you can do so much with it. It's really the beginning of the creation and all the imagination that you can have around the product is just fantastic. So. I guess at the time I didn't know, of course, that I wanted to work in the family business, but I fell in love definitely with the products, that's for sure.
What I find interesting, and you talk a lot about it, is that already quite at a quite young age, not when you were 5 or 6, but you almost knew, as a teenager or so, that that's something I can see myself in. I could be the head of that company, or did that take a lot of?
It did take more time. Okay. And I was lucky enough to have parents that really encourage us to do something that we like to do. And I think that's very wise also when you're having family businesses, to give your children the choice and the freedom to choose what they love to do, because in the long run, if you don't have it here in your body, if you don't have the passion for it, it's quite complicated. And so that's why I've done different experiences elsewhere. And once I touched concretely and worked really with the family business and Caran d'Ache, that's where I thought, okay, that's really something I would love to do.
Mm-hmm. But there is a pressure, and you touched it, a little bit. That, I mean, even if it's not spoken out, you are part of a family which is in that traditional business, and you might even think, if I don't do it, it might get sold, or it's the end of the family business. So how big was that pressure for you to be able to say, well, no, I'm not interested?
That's a good question. I think, after all, it's a business. It's, of course, there is a lot of emotion linked to it, but there are also lots of opportunities. And it's probably what you have to look at one point and decide, okay, I really believe in it, and I believe I can continue develop that brand or that business, or you don't feel like you're able to do it. And in that case, maybe it's wise to take the other solution and probably sell the business or have somebody else run it for you. So it's probably an experience that needs to be well thought about, that's for sure, and discussed as well, and planned.
How about the international culture that you probably bring in here as well? Because you've been an executive you've worked in Denmark, you've worked in England, you've worked in France, always as a manager or as an executive. Do you bring some of those kind of key learnings to your job in Switzerland? You've been here for a long time. I mean, it has to be said.
I think, well, the culture, it will affect you. So if you work in France, you will work in a different way. If you work in Germany, you will work in a different way because the hierarchies are different, and the way people think. In France you have Monsieur le Président, and he will decide eventually. So everyone will look up to him. In the Danish culture, it's different. I think in Switzerland it is also different. You don't have the hierarchies. In Germany, you certainly have them. In the Anglo-Saxon culture, you have less hierarchies, but you still have the elite. So every country, every culture is different. So when you try to work in those cultures, you will pick up something, and in the end, you'll become a mixture of those. And I think I am a mixture of those cultures, and I try to adapt. And I feel really well in Switzerland because this is an international country. I mean, there's no country where you have so many international managers and so many big companies relative to the size of the country.
However, the employees, they stay Swiss, or most of them are Swiss. If you compare your experiences in those different countries and with those different cultures, maybe, is it easier to be a boss here?
Yes and no. I think there is a built-in respect. If you are a manager in a large company like Amag, I think the employees, they have a certain respect. So this is sometimes helpful, sometimes it's probably less helpful. In Switzerland, most managers have I think they have a comfortable life. But the price you pay for that is that you are extremely visible in the Swiss industry. So being a manager here,
you can't hide.
You can't hide. So there's no. I mean, in England, I was running a big company, bigger than Amag, but no one cared. In Switzerland, I think people care. And if I make a mistake, I'll be in the newspapers the next day.
Has that changed, your leadership style, with everything that changes around it? I mean, with all these challenges, are you still the same leader as you were 10, 20 years ago?
I think I'm much more experienced. I'm calmer today. But I was never emotional in that sense. But my early formation helped me in that. Having been out in the practical world early helped me also to take a very practical approach to solve problems. And that has kind of been with me during my professional career.
You're a hands-on, a practical leader.
I'm hands-on, but also I always try to form the best teams around me, because I'm really convinced that you deliver through the teams you have around you. It's not just about you. It is about the company, it is about the teams around you, because they deliver at the end of the day the value. You lead them, you steer them, but it's wrong to believe that it is only because of you, because that's not how a company of the size of an ABB, etc. works.
Of course, that's what a lot of leaders say, and a lot of CEOs and chairmen say.
But I think I have practiced it. If you would ask my staff, they would always tell you that I have a very inclusive style.
And not a big ego?
No, I don't. That's a word which I don't use, and I don't practice in that sense.
I mean, the press said so as well. They called you once, I think, the quiet giant of the Swiss economy, someone who was highly successful, yet very modest, very, I mean, we hardly saw you, as you say yourself, we hardly saw you losing your temper, for example. You're still a very hands-on guy as well. How did you keep that? I mean, isn't there a risk of taking off with all the success?
I think the risk is there. I always tried to tell myself this is not about me. This is about the company I'm serving. The company will be around for another 125 years, I hope, and therefore I'm just the steward of a few years, and all what I do needs to be in line and the best for the company. That's the one side. And then I think the other side, I always really kept private life and business life apart. And I had a very great family, great kids, a great wife, and that's where I grounded over the weekends again, and I was just a normal person, and that helped me to kind of drive the companies I was leading in a very different way, despite the fact that the doors are open to you to really become very egocentric. But I was never interested in that, because I really wanted the best for the company and the best for myself and the families.